a podcast about product management, user experience design, technology, and more. This is Product by Design. All right, welcome back to another episode of Product by Design. I am Kyle Evans, and this week, I'm super excited because we have with us Jens Goetzmann, and we are super excited to be talking with Jens today, who is a longtime product manager, and he has been writing a lot about product management, and we'll dive into a little bit about that and his background in just a second. But first off, it's great to have you. Welcome to the podcast, Jens.
Thanks for having me.
So you are the head of product at RevenueCat, which is a subscription management software as a service. And you have also been in product management at other places, including a fitness app, 8Fit, Microsoft's enterprise social network, Yammer, which is super interesting. And you are based in Germany. Is that right?
That's correct. Yeah.
Cool. So with that kind of intro, why don't you tell us a little bit more about yourself?
Yeah. So by background, I'm a computer scientist. So I studied computer science back in uni, and kind of on the side had a couple of failed startups that never really amounted to anything. Kind of startup is almost too grand a word for the projects that I had going. But basically, I doing that, I realized that I knew how to code, but I didn't really know anything about basically building a business or making money. And with that, I decided to join consulting, or become a consultant. So I went into management consulting, and kind of as you do, I had the idea of doing that for a couple of years, and it ended up being 5 years in the end. But by the time the kind of 5-year mark had come around, I decided that was enough, and that I wanted to kind of get back to building stuff and not just building PowerPoint slides. So with that said, I figured that now with my background in technology and the kind of business acumen that I had built up working in consulting, that product management would be a good fit, kind of to bridge the different worlds. And yeah, so decided to pursue a product management career, joined Microsoft in the Yammer team as a product manager. I did that for a couple of years, and then joined 8Fit, first as a product manager, then became head of product there over time. And then, a few months ago, I joined RevenueCat. So, given at 8Fit as a subscription-based mobile app, I had learned about the challenges of managing subscriptions across different platforms. And so I knew the pain points that RevenueCat is solving pretty well. So I decided that would be a good next step. And yeah, I have been there for about 3 months now and been loving it.
Awesome. That is super fascinating. So stepping back just a little bit, were you exposed kind of in your early stages in the consulting world to product management, or did that come in some other way? I'm just interested because it feels like all of us come into product management in just some interesting way, and either find out about it or kind of stumble into it. And so, were you exposed to it in some way, or find out about it and it just kind of caught your interest and you were able to kind of move into it?
I think that's a great question. And I honestly don't know the exact answer. So, I mean, I was, in my last year of consulting, I was in San Francisco. So I was already kind of somewhat embedded in the tech world, knew lots of people in the tech world. And so, I mean, I did some consulting also in my last couple of years for tech company clients, but I wasn't really like directly working with kind of product development. So my exposure there was somewhat limited. I think it was mostly basically through friends who worked in the tech industry in San Francisco. And I think my first conversations were really, with like product managers that my friends had introduced me to kind of see, is this something that could be interesting to me? And yeah, then decided that it was interesting and decided to pursue that. And, I think like one of the interesting kind of, everybody gets their start in product management somehow. So some, like it's not something that you learn typically like in school. Yeah. So for me, it was basically just lots of applications to those companies that would accept non-product managers into a product management role, of course there are these days the APM or RPM programs that also accept typically taken college graduates, whatever. But given that I was most certainly not a college graduate anymore at that point, I just had to find those companies that would give somebody a shot that didn't have direct product experience. And I think like it's turned out well, but everybody has to get their start somehow.
That's super interesting. And it's always interesting to me to find the different ways that people kind of come into product management, because there are probably similar paths, but it's no two are exactly alike. So that's really interesting. Very cool. So very interesting background. And, the reason that, we're kind of talking was, you write a lot about product management and your experience, and you obviously have a lot of experience in product management with a number of different companies, including, heading up product management in, somewhat in the last organization and then, in your current organization. And you, like I said, you've written a number of great articles about product management. So I'm interested, what has been kind of the inspiration for the writing that you do, and what kind of got you started in writing those articles?
Yeah. So, I think in general, like I've always been interested in kind of, I guess, sharing and educating, from like for a very long time. So, back in uni, I kind of taught some HTML classes and stuff like that. Also worked as a teaching assistant for a while. So I guess just kind of sharing my knowledge is something that I've always been interested in. And over the years, I've had a couple of failed blog attempts, about different topics that I didn't stick with for longer than a year or whatever. So, they're kind of, now I've been writing about product management essentially almost ever since I became a product manager. And what really got me started was that, I joined Yammer in product management, and one of the first articles that one of the first posts that I ever wrote was about the product teardowns that we used to do at Yammer. And interestingly, it's still like one of my most read articles, even though it's now 5 years old, but it keeps getting more and more reads. How that came about was really that, this was this like weekly kind of ceremony that we had where we, every Friday afternoon, we would sit together as the entire product management team, and also, some designers and user researchers, and just like look at any new product that was interesting and just kind of play with it, try and understand why it was built the way that it was built, try and understand the strategy behind it, think about what we liked and what we didn't like, and kind of also then how we might apply some of these learnings to Yammer, so to the product that we were working on. And so when I joined, this kind of regular meeting had somewhat kind of fallen asleep. So it wasn't really done every week. And basically, I think my manager said, "Hey, we have this meeting. It's not really working. We need somebody to basically just run it every week." And I think she said, "I think it could be good if you did that and owned that, and just have something to kind of run that's very low. You don't have to have a great deal of knowledge. You just have to make sure you organize it and show up and have something to discuss every week." Yeah, so I started running that, and that was then the kind of the impetus to also start writing about that. And that got me started. And I've been writing kind of ever since. At the beginning, I wrote a number of articles basically for the Yammer blog, and eventually just started writing more myself. And over the past, let's say 2.5 years or so, I've made it a habit to publish at least once a month, and occasionally more frequently. But yeah, that's how I got started. And it's interesting, I think, because once you get into a habit of actually thinking about, hey, I want to write something on a regular basis, you just kind of start building that rhythm and that muscle to actually whenever some interesting idea pops into my head that I'll write it down somewhere. Maybe I'll write about this, and it also helps me just kind of in terms of like forming my own thoughts about like and my own kind of principles, how I think about the profession, how I think about like my own work and kind of how I apply that going forward.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I absolutely love it. I've read a whole bunch of your articles. I haven't gone back to that first one. I'm going to have to, because that sounds I love the idea of just doing a product teardown. Now, you were doing them with just other people's products, not just internal products, but just you take anything interesting and just say, let's look at this. I love that idea. So in your writing, you mentioned, it's helped you clarify and some of your ideas and some of your thinking. Has that been, and as well as just share some of the things that you've been learning. Has that been some of the main benefits to you, or have you found other benefits to writing regularly as well?
Yeah, I mean, I think it, like, to me, it's, I guess there's a couple of benefits there. One is just, the kind of increased awareness that you kind of bring if you think about like, how might I actually write about this? And then also, to some extent, like writing is also a forcing function to actually like formalize some of the thoughts and principles and, see some of the gaps as well in your thinking when you actually write things down. So I think, that's certainly one of the aspects. And I think it just also kind of expands your horizon to, keep thinking of what are other things, what are other aspects that I haven't really touched on in my writing that could be interesting as well. And then I guess the side benefit, but that's really not what I would say is the main benefit for me, is that it kind of builds maybe a bit of a personal brand, I guess. Otherwise I probably would not be on this podcast today. But also, I guess another benefit, even though I don't necessarily, it's not a benefit for me, but, I feel good if people read it and it resonates with them and they learn something from it, they take something away from it. So, that's certainly a benefit as well, even though, I don't always, learn about that, right? I hope from the number of reads that some of the articles get, I hope that some people are getting taking something away from them. But I don't always personally experience that.
Yeah. I think you're exactly right. I used to work for a couple of former Amazon executives. And so that was a huge thing for them, was writing out ideas and writing out your thoughts. And it exposes a lot of holes in your thinking that you could just, in talking about them, kind of, I don't want to say paper over, but you could kind of gloss over if you're just talking or you're just thinking about it. But when you have to actually write it out, you find that you either know something or you don't, because you have to put it actually down on paper or on the screen. And so it, like you said, it's a forcing function to show that you have a handle on it or you don't, and you have to make sure your thinking is very clear and concise and things like that. So that's super interesting. I love it. So diving into some of your articles that you've written, I guess I'll ask first, is there a favorite that you have? You mentioned the one that you wrote early on about the product teardowns, which sounds super interesting, but is there something you've written that that stands out as a favorite, or you look back on and you're like, yeah, I love that one. I nailed it.
I'm not sure. I think so. So one thing that I think is interesting is that I definitely can still not tell what articles are going to do well and which ones aren't. Sometimes it's very surprising ones that, collect a lot of visits, a lot of reads. And maybe it's because nobody has written about that in exactly the same way, or maybe, I don't know, for some reason it's ended up on the top of a Google search or something. I don't know. So here's one example of one that I didn't think was the most insightful thing in the world or whatever that did quite pretty well, which is I wrote an article on how to set up a product organization. That one did really well. And, I definitely wouldn't say it's one of my favorite articles, but, it's just kind of one that has been rather successful. I think maybe the one that I'm still kind of proud of, and it has a funny background story as well, or not funny, but interesting background story as well, is one that's called how to build a product roadmap. And here the interesting backstory is I wrote this at a time when I was, kind of interviewing for some jobs. In the end, like I didn't actually end up changing jobs, but I had some job interviews. And that was one of the questions that somebody asked me. And I didn't really have a great answer, but it just kind of, of course I had some answer, but it wasn't great or really formalized or whatever, or really thought through end to end. So that question kept nagging at me. So then I was like, okay, I actually should write down what do I think should be like the ideal process for creating a product roadmap that isn't just a list of features, right? But that is actually, focus on outcomes instead of outputs, but that still kind of makes sense and everything. And I think I've then started building on that idea more. And I mean, I guess that's often the case with people who write about product management, that they have certain themes that they kind of expand on over time. And, certainly I think like road mapping, prioritization is one of the areas that I've just been thinking a lot about. And, where I've had several articles that kind of kept expanding on the same idea. But yeah, I don't think I have a single favorite article. They're all my like children, the written kind. So
yeah. Oh, I think that's funny. I too enjoy writing a bunch, and you hit on a couple of things that probably anybody who writes acknowledges as well. In that, one, sometimes you just write because you need to and you want to, and I found that sometimes it's just cathartic, and you just write because you just want to, and then some of that ends up doing you put it out there, and for no other reason than you just you needed to think through something, and you write it, and it really resonates with other people. And you're like, wow, that didn't expect that. And then some things you can write something, you're like, man, it's really resonating with me. And you put it out there, and it's just, you're the person who it really resonates with. And it maybe it's the timing or just whatever other reason, but it's just, it doesn't end up being like the hit article or the hit post that you think it might be. And it's just interesting to kind of see that variation across time and across different themes and articles, and that it's hard to predict what exactly is going to resonate with other people, especially in product management articles. But anyway.
And I think the interesting thing there to me is that is like such a good parallel to product management or product development work in general. You can do a lot of kind of upfront thinking and theorizing and hypothesizing, but sometimes your pet feature that you really loved that you built, and then you measure it, and adoption is low. It didn't actually move the metrics the way that you wanted it to. People are confused about it, and it looked so great in your own head and on the prototype, and you really still think it's the best thing since sliced bread, but in the end adoption is poor or whatever, right? So I think to me that's actually one of the things that I find so interesting, is that it's both writing and product development is kind of a creative endeavor, right? And any creative endeavor you get better at with practice, but also just with the number of shots that you take, kind of, and some of the shots will end up missing in both of the in both writing and product development. And of course you can minimize the risks, but sometimes still things will fail.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, no, that's exactly right. Those two things are very, very similar in a number of different ways. All right. So talking about, some of your articles specifically, I want to dive into a couple of the different topics that you've written about. And one of them was working with engineers. Working with engineers as product managers and product teams is probably one of the most important things that we do. And it's something that you wrote about. So at a high level, what are some of the things that you wish you knew, coming into product management about working with engineers and engineering teams before you started? And maybe what are some of the things that you've learned in working as a product manager with engineers?
Yeah. So I'll kind of, without walking through the exact points that I made in the article, I'll kind of maybe try to pull it up a level. I think one of the things in general is that as a product manager, you should really try and think of engineers as your partners in the process, kind of end to end. I think that starts with getting engineers to help you understand their perspectives, getting them to help you understand how the system works, how the architecture works, what the kind of crucial constraints are, where things are easy and where things are difficult. And, I think it depends a little bit how technical your background is, how easy that's going to come to you. So, I think the less technical a person you are as a product manager, the more you'll have to work there. However, I think in general, that's getting engineers to basically tell you about their world and tell you about the constraints that they face and the challenges they face and kind of the battles they fight. I think that's just something that I think is very good advice, and definitely something where I in the beginning was a little bit too much like I should know this stuff, and I basically that's never the case. I mean, you should never feel bad about just getting an engineer to sit down with you and just talk you through some of the most, what is difficult about their job and what isn't difficult, and how does the system work. Another thing about treating them as partners, and I think that's something that I still to this day, I would say that I'm still working on, is how to get engineers involved very early in really the, not just the what are we building, but why are we building it? Getting them exposed to customers, getting them exposed to the real problems that you're solving. I think it's definitely one of the things where over time I've come to realize and appreciate the importance of that for a variety of reasons. I mean, for one thing, motivation wise, it's just, much easier to motivate yourself if you know that you're actually solving problems for somebody rather than just kind of making code work. But also, all the micro decisions that you take, as an engineer, you're not just kind of making big decisions about the product that, maybe as a product manager, you basically can dictate if you're not partnering with engineering. But there's many micro decisions that an engineer will take kind of any given day, and if they really understand what you're doing and why you're doing it and how this relates to the problem that the customer has in the end, and then they can make better decisions for every single micro decision that they take. So that's certainly something where, and it's not without challenges. It's easy to say that, but it's not without challenges because of course the weight of product work early in the phase of any given project or mission or feature or whatever is of course higher, and perhaps an engineer still working on the last thing. So pulling them out of that into the product discovery can sometimes be tricky, but yeah, it's certainly one of the things where I think, it's hard to learn, but it's really, really important to learn how to do that well. And I think ideally, you do that by just finding engineers that you can partner with really well and that you can just bounce ideas off, one another. And yeah, I think, those are maybe some of the higher level topics. Oh yeah, maybe one other topic to mention, and that's something that's kind of interesting because it differs from company to company, is really understanding the development process and what your role as a product manager is in it. And it really depends from company to company. I mean, the development process might change from company to company, but also the role of the product manager. For example, how much of a project manager is the product manager supposed to be? And in some companies, product managers do a lot of project management of writing tasks and making sure that nobody is blocked and whatever. And in others, that is all done by senior engineers, engineering managers. So it really depends. But that's certainly something where having a good understanding of that, but also helping improve the processes where you can, I think is really important.
Yeah, you've touched on so many great points that I think are just absolutely spot on. Really understanding the engineers and the development team and what's the process, what are the pain points, and what the technical, what the tech stack is and just how things work. You brought up the point of as product managers, I think often we feel like we should understand everything, and it can be really difficult to ask questions, but it is so important to just come into things and understand that you can't know everything and you shouldn't know everything. And probably nobody expects you to understand everything. And if they do, that's probably just a misplaced expectation. And that the more questions you ask and the more just straight up, the more ignorance you admit and just say like, I don't know everything and I'm just going to be okay with that, the better you will be able to serve everybody. And the better you will be able to like come up to speed like quickly, as opposed to just pretending that you understand everything. And then, getting 6 months down the road and not really understanding like what the process is and like what the technology is and what the biggest obstacles are and things like that. And so like, I think early on, just really asking those types of questions and being willing, honestly, it comes down to just being willing to be stupid at the beginning and ask lots of questions, which can be really, really difficult, especially for product people. Cause I feel like most of us just want to be like, we know it, we understand it. Like we're like very driven people for the most part. And so it can be hard to admit a lot of ignorance in a lot of places.
Yeah. And I think that's a fantastic point. And I mean, it's funny because I think like the more senior I get, the more advanced in my career, the easier it's gotten for me to basically admit what I don't know. Which is kind of interesting because like I also know what I know, right? And I guess especially early in your career, you kind of just trying to like be seen as knowing more than you do. But in some of these areas, I think it just doesn't help because just you'll get stuck at the same in the same spots again and again if you don't ask and really try to understand what's going on, right? So yeah, I think that's absolutely true.
Yeah, and understanding like where you fit into the team, you mentioned that as well, and I think you're exactly right. It feels like the more senior you get, the easier it is to just what you know, and you're absolutely willing to admit to all of the things that you don't know, and it's just easier. I can remember being much younger in my career and just not wanting to admit ignorance on a lot of things because it felt like I should know these things and I don't. And so I need to just not admit to it and just like act like I know. But it's so much easier as you get further in your career to be like, I don't know what this is. I know a lot of things, but I don't know this and I don't know this. So like, you're going to have to tell me, you're going to have to walk me through that. Being able to do that early on will be a serious advantage. Like if you're younger in your career, just admitting that you don't know things and then finding out like where you fit into the team in general. Like every team is different. I've never worked with two teams that operate the same way. So like part of product management, it literally is like finding out how things are operating, finding out like where you fit in and how things are going to work. And then getting in, not necessarily that you have to fit within that framework, because you can change it and adjust it as a product manager, but at least understanding it so that you can get in and work within, the team and contribute and do all of those things. Like you really have to understand it before you can get in and make changes.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you don't understand the status quo, it's really hard to suggest how things might be different. But I mean, I like, just kind of to double down on that point, I think that's absolutely the case that, as you grow more senior and you've seen more different ways of doing things, you just realize that there isn't like the one like tried and true recipe for success, right? I mean, and I think, sometimes earlier in your career, you think that it is there and like everybody knows that you just don't. So you just kind of pretend. But yeah, the earlier you realize that that's not the case and that you should just remain curious and ask questions. And then, once you've asked enough questions and kind of gathered enough information, then you can maybe say, hey, could we try this or that instead or whatever.
Yeah. And then you touched on what I think is just a super important point is making sure that you get engineers and the engineering team involved in understanding the why. So you as a product manager understand them and you get the engineering team understanding the customers and understanding what you're doing and understanding why they are doing the things, because you literally can't, as a product manager, dictate every decision, and engineers will be making tons of decisions throughout like the product and throughout the development. And if they don't understand the reason that they're building something, they won't necessarily make a bad decision, but they may not make the decision that is best for the product, just simply because they don't have the full context. And so making sure that they do have that full context is such a huge part of product management, not only so that they have that motivation, but also so they make those really good product decisions, and also so that like you don't slow them down, and we can just keep moving forward quickly with what we're building and what we're doing. I've seen teams and organizations where that isn't the case, and where it's either like full like requirements documents that can never possibly capture everything, and that just it bogs things down so quickly, or every decision has to be like vetted out, and that also bogs things down so quickly. So like if everybody has like a shared understanding, it can be so much better and so much more powerful to move forward. It can be really messy as you build that up, which is why product management can be much more art than science, but it becomes much better like as you build than, if you tried to either dictate everything or tried to keep like an engineering team only in development without ever understanding the context.
Yeah, it can feel faster to get started if you don't build up that context, right? Because you can just it's just maybe just the product manager or maybe product manager and designer just kind of hashing things out. And then, that can feel fast and can feel like you're making a lot of progress early on. But then, especially for most complex problems, that part of the process is just going to be very short and quick, regardless of, even if you spend more time actually building up that context. But then, the implementation phase is just going to be much, much easier and much smoother. And also, I think, all of these micro decisions that the engineers take, they might not even have an effect right then and there, but, just once the next version comes around or whatever, the next improvement, then it's going to just turn out, hey, the decisions that we made in the previous phase on the engineering side, they end up holding us back in terms of how we can change things. And that's, because the context wasn't there for the engineers to really like appreciate, hey, what are ways in which we might in future change this so that it can, cover additional use cases that our customers might have or whatever, additional adjacent problems. Whereas if the engineers were involved and heard customers talk about their problems, they can probably envision that themselves. Hey, it might be cool if in the end, as a future version, we might be able to add this or that. So I'll build the code and the architecture in a way that's going to make that possible, right? And those are things that typically you don't even see as a product manager. Like you're not going to be there for every single like architectural decision on the technical side. So yeah, that's I think what makes this so crucial.
Yeah. No, that's exactly right. It's so important. You wrote a little bit about this too. Well, you wrote quite a bit about kind of the discomfort of a great product team and how we kind of manage the being able to have these kind of discussions and debates and work because it can be, we've been talking about like, as we get started, it can be kind of messy and it's a lot of gray area and things like that. What experiences have you had in, some of that managing the discomfort of a really great product team as we start to get in and have lots of ideas and, manage that, all of the confluence of things kind of coming together as we start to get ready to build, a great product. What has been your experience in that area?
Yeah, let me kind of maybe start by, giving a little bit of background there. So the article about the discomfort of a great product team was inspired by one of my favorite articles that I've ever read, about diversity and how diverse teams feel less comfortable, and that's why they perform better. And the insight there is, and of course, like the angle of that particular article was about really diversity and inclusion and why it's important. But I think there's just so many takeaways from that it's, just being in the comfort zone and being comfortable around each other as a team and not experiencing any discomfort is not a sign of a high performing team. There should be psychological safety, and you should still feel, trust and that as a team. So, it's not about like a toxic environment, but there should be a healthy level of disagreement, of discussion, of debate. And, that can sometimes feel uncomfortable, right? And, there should be sometimes decisions where, not everybody is going to be exactly happy with the decision that was taken. So, because otherwise, it means that either everybody has just kind of completely tuned out and somebody is just making the decisions that everybody else just doesn't care anymore, right? I mean, that's not a great situation to be in. Or everybody just thinks completely alike, in which case you're probably not considering all the options, not considering all the perspectives, kind of just just kind of falling prey to groupthink, which is also not a great situation. So I guess the question is, how do you establish that a team in which you have that kind of healthy level of discomfort? Oh yeah, one other aspect that I wanted to add there is, of course, that every growth comes with discomfort. Growing means going out of your comfort zone, doing something that's not comfortable. And I think that's the same thing as a team. Like, you grow if something is hard, if something, there's something where it doesn't always feel great in the moment. And of course, like there's a healthy balance, right? Like if it feels too uncomfortable, then people might just withdraw from the process altogether, or from the team altogether. So I think, how do I think about this, and also what have my experience has been there? I mean, I think my experience has been like the greatest performing teams that I've been a part of were the ones where people were super engaged and also had like really heated debates about stuff. But then in the end, we're all happy to just kind of move forward together. So I think basically creating that trust base and creating that basis of psychological safety is really important. And it's of course not something that any product manager can do on their own. I mean, it's, it has to do with the culture of the company. It has to do with the leadership of the team, or that's kind of, the respective functional leaders or whatever. So, but of course, everybody on the team is also responsible for that. And I think, product managers, even though they're not often technically managing anyone on their team, they product management is still a leadership position in a way, and requires leadership characteristics. So you're certainly one that can help establish that. So I think that's one of the aspects that I definitely would always think about, is how do I make sure that I create that level of psychological safety and trust on the team, and then also how do I encourage people to speak up, speak their mind. And, doing that by, there's of course several ways that you can do that. I think, one of the aspects, where this just comes back to what we just talked about, is making sure that you actually involve everybody early on in the kind of why phase and the context building phase. Because if you don't have, if an engineer who doesn't have that context, it's going to be very hard for them to argue, hey, should we do something else entirely here? Wouldn't that be more valuable to the customer? If they haven't ever met the customer, right? Or haven't ever spoken to the customer, haven't ever heard like it kind of from the horse's mouth of what the issues are, what the problems are that we're trying to solve. So it starts there, certainly, building up that context. So that's often something that as a product manager you can really help encourage, just by making sure that you bring people in early in the process, bring them along as you're doing kind of customer discovery, customer conversations. But then also, you can make sure that you really facilitate that through kind of joint brainstorming session, joint discussions, joint ideation sessions. Of course, there are formats that you can follow that are specifically designed for that, like design sprints or something. But you don't have to like do something fancy like that. It's just about actually like giving people the space and giving people the opportunity, and also asking for their opinions, right? Because I think often you have to foster that culture somewhat, especially with engineers. And I'm kind of putting in a special focus there on engineers, just because on many product teams that's kind of the majority of the people on the team, and often like the product and design collaboration, more naturally has a bit of that debate character, because you're kind of working together early in the process. But that's just two voices, right? And if you then add whatever, let's say 5 engineers or however many engineers might be on the team, that's just more perspectives, more different ways of looking at the problem. And that in the end can lead to more debate and lead to more discomfort, but that then leads to better results because you've actually now taken in more perspectives, taken in more different viewpoints, more opinions, and in the end, the like synthesis or whatever path forward you decide on will be better for that, just because you've kind of tried out more different options. So yeah, that like again, it actually like dovetails very nicely with the discussion on engineers that we had earlier. Yeah, it feels like it slows you down. It feels like it makes things harder. It feels like there's more disagreements, and you could just avoid them by streamlining things a little bit. But the streamlined process in this case is not always the better one, or actually very often it's going to be the worst one, right? And to me, one of the things there, and again, like that touches on another thing that we said earlier about trying more different, like trying out many, like having many shots on goal, essentially, because that some of them will miss. And if you generate more ideas, if you take in more perspectives, more opinions, that you would just multiply the chances of one of them being actually workable in the end and actually delivering the value that you are hoping for. So yeah, that's kind of, to me, the benefit. Even though it might feel messy, it might feel discomfortable, it might feel it might feel like you're just kind of wasting energy, but in the end, the energy is not going to be wasted because the payoffs are just kind of delayed.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I love all of that. Putting in, especially the work up front, where it gets really messy, and anybody who's been through that process like a number of times knows that it can be super messy, especially in that discovery area where you're trying to get to what is the right thing, how do we go about it in the right way, and how do we bring all of these different, especially bringing different viewpoints in. It can feel chaotic even when you start to bring in a whole bunch of people, to the point where it gets really uncomfortable. You have that, like you mentioned, the discomfort of a good product team, because hopefully you have multiple voices and perspectives coming in from different ways saying, have we thought about this or doing it this way? And I mean, the comfortable way is to come at it, like you said, with just like one or two people saying, this is the way we're going to do it, and here it is. And then you hand it off, and then engineering team builds it and that sort of thing. And that's a way to get either like bad or mediocre products and experiences. But like going through the messy process of incorporating all of these different perspectives and thoughts into it is probably a slower and messier way up front, but then allows you to be much faster and create something much better, because you don't get a little bit down the road and think, oh no, why didn't we think of this thing? Or, we didn't fully consider this other way or this other perspective. And now we have to go back, or now we have to just not do it this other way that might have been better because we didn't think about it and that sort of thing. So I love everything that you said. I think dealing with the discomfort and just understanding that creating something good is going to be uncomfortable, especially in the beginning, but it gets you a much, much better experience and much, much better product in the end.
Yeah, I think like one of the, just kind of to add to that, I think one of the reasons that this early discussion with more people can be so messy is that the problems are messy and the world is messy, right? And if you're just kind of abstracting away or like simplifying some, I mean, of course, like in the end, you'll have to have some abstraction and some simplification. But if you simplify too early or kind of too early on, disregard some of that complexity and just kind of completely cut it off from whatever you're building, then chances are you've kind of hidden away some of the complexity that was actually important to consider. And so this mess that's present in the real world, if you bring that into the early discovery phase, then hopefully you'll find an abstraction or a simplification later on that more accurately represents or that mess that's present in the real world and more accurately solves for that.
Yeah, no, I absolutely love that. It's our discovery is messy because the world is messy, and we have to acknowledge that and embrace it. Really, I think that's perfect. Cool. I wanted to touch on one other article that you wrote on risk management and how product management really is fundamentally about risk management. and on a couple of different aspects of risk management. But tell us a little bit more about how product management really is about risk management from your perspective.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think for me, the biggest reason there is this kind of fundamental uncertainty that is inherent to all product development, in that you just never know if any idea that you have, if any approach that you take is actually going to be successful in the end. If that wasn't there, if you just had to basically any idea that popped into your head, or any idea that was brought up about, a better way to solve a certain problem, if that, in the end would turn out to be successful, then you really wouldn't need product managers. Then you would have a designer who, makes it look pretty, and then you have an engineer who builds it, and that's it, right? I mean, if that was the case, then, we really would not need product managers. So what are product managers there for then? And why is product management like risk management? Yeah, because there are these fundamental risks that basically cause this uncertainty, and the fact that you don't know what's going to work and what isn't going to work. And I won't take credit for like these risks, or even the idea that you need to manage them. I just thought it was an interesting way of thinking about it, because risk management sounds like something that is so stodgy, like something that you would do, somebody like in a bank would do to manage their financial exposure or whatever. But if you think about it, that is really at the heart of it. At the heart of product management is managing those risks. And of course, you do that in a different way than somebody in the bank would, or maybe in kind of on a construction site or whatever. But you're still managing risks. So what are those risks? What are kind of the framework that I like there is Marty Kagan's 4 big risks, which are value risks. So the risk of, can we build something valuable? It's feasibility. Can we actually build it? It's usability. Can our users use it? Our customers use it? Can they actually, use the solution that we put in front of them? And then it's also viability risk. So does it make sense for our business? And then I also like adding a 5th risk, which, for example, Teresa Torres has brought up, which is kind of ethical risk. Should we build this? Is this something, if we build this, that we can kind of still look at ourselves in the mirror, or if this was put on the cover of the New York Times, would we feel proud that we did this? So I think those are some of the risks, and of course, like, how do you then manage those risks? So that's kind of where I guess the more product management specific, or let's say digital product specific mechanisms and tools come in, like identifying what are your riskiest assumptions, or assumption mapping, identifying which ones are your riskiest assumptions, and then designing like the minimum test that you can to test those assumptions, be it through just user research, customer conversations, through prototyping. And, it really depends on, if you have these 5 risks, like what are the ways to validate those assumptions? And, sometimes if you cannot validate something, then you might mitigate it, which is another thing that you do in risk management, right? I mean, you can either like eliminate risks, or you can perhaps mitigate them, where you just say, well, maybe we don't fully know, but can we somehow make it so the assumption just isn't as critical anymore, because, we're kind of working around it. So that's kind of that was kind of at the heart of the article, and the thought that I had, that, kind of you're a glorified risk manager as a product manager. It sounds, the title sounds nicer, but in the end, like, if there wasn't risk, then you wouldn't be doing product management. And the better you are at reducing these risks, the better product manager you are in the end, because, then you'll have fewer failed attempts of improving your product. I think, that's, to me, is another, I guess, maybe corollary to this, that some people who come into product management think that the best product managers are the ones that have the best ideas, and that you kind of have product sense in the sense of, hey, I have all of these brilliant ideas how to make the product better. But in the end, like, for me, I always say ideas are dime a dozen. I have not worked on any product where there wasn't an abundance of ideas for how to improve the product. And the problem is always how do you know which ones are the good ones, and how do you basically validate that quickly? Because in the end, like even very smart people that know the product, that have great product sense, can disagree on which ones are the most promising ones. So basically making sure that you have some way of learning that quickly, and also prioritizing which ones to test. That is what great product management is about. It's not about having the best ideas.
Yeah, I think you've absolutely nailed it. I love the summation of product management, where if everything was a sure thing, like really product management would be pointless. Like you wouldn't need product management at all. And it's not, like you said, it's not about just the ideas, because I think all of us probably have an idea backlog that stretches, beyond anything that we could ever accomplish as far as what we want to do with our products and frankly, probably the companies that we work for, and maybe even the side things that we want to do. Like the ideas are there. It's about which are the best ideas. How do we find that out? And how do we figure out what is most likely to be successful? We can't ever know like what's going to be successful for sure, but how do we figure out what's most likely to, and what's going to deliver the best results for our users, for our business, and what's going to do that the fastest and in the best way, and minimizing those risks you talked about. I think that's absolutely spot on. That's really great.
Yeah. And the nice thing about this is that, in this kind of iterative risk management process, which is not at all like a risk management process, or like in a bank or whatever, is that, as you actually validate those assumptions and as you learn more, the ideas keep getting better. You can start with a pretty poor idea, but if you kind of validate that incrementally, test assumptions and correct and course correct, like that poor initial idea can become a brilliant idea later on. And it's probably better than any that you would have just kind of come up with if you hadn't gone through this incremental process of learning and like validating assumptions. So I think that is kind of the beauty of it as well.
Yeah. Yep. I think that's spot on. So let me ask you, we've talked about a bunch of things, working with engineers, working in kind of that messiness of product discovery and product development, and the process of managing risk for somebody who's young in their career, starting out in product. What are some of the things that they could do to really either get into product or advance their career, right now? Like what would be some things that either you wish you had done, or you would suggest to somebody who's kind of either starting out or pretty new in their career?
Yeah, I mean, I think like maybe one of the themes that is kind of spanned across this conversation is that of listening, right? And of listening and learning, and just admitting what you don't know. And I mean, I think like as I said, like, or as we both said, it's really hard. Like the more junior you are, the more you feel like you have to predict something that you're not. But like, honestly, just listening a lot. And, I think that is true on several different areas. I mean, I think one of the things that we haven't touched on that much is like talking to customers. I think that is one of the things where like any product manager hopefully has good excuses to do that. Just kind of talk to customers as much as you can and learn about their problems. And I mean, I've always said like there hasn't been a single customer conversation that I've had, I think, where I didn't learn something new, where I didn't learn something that I didn't know about a product and how it was being used. So I think that to me is certainly like the number one step, because it just builds up empathy, and it builds up just a great repository of knowledge and of ideas and of perspective, that also just helps you understand that you are not the representative for like anyone using your product. So I think, talking to customers, talking to the people on your team, building up that knowledge about how they are working with the challenges that they are facing, and, how they are doing their job. I think, building up that empathy for both people that you work for, your customers, people that you work with, the people on your team, your stakeholders. I think that is certainly, to me, the biggest point of leverage that you have early on. And I mean, people, if you're early in your career, then everybody knows that you're early in your career. So yes, maybe you're trying to pretend that you're kind of playing in the big league or whatever, but in the end, everybody knows that it's okay for you to ask questions because you can't know everything yet. So I think, that to me is like the biggest thing. Of course, like also there's lots of good stuff to read and learn, and the resources of our product management are kind of endless. So there's definitely lots of good books to read, good articles to read. I think I certainly, I'm personally a reader and a learner, and I'm never done reading and learning and just kind of getting more additional perspectives on what I should be doing and could be doing. And, even after many years in the profession, I read things and I'm like, yeah, I haven't tried that. I should try that, and just kind of having a list of things to try and experiment with from whatever sources that you, that you kind of, that you read, that you watch, that you listen to. I think that to me is another good piece of advice.
Yep. I think that's perfect. That is, I think, absolutely perfect advice. Continue to be curious and learn as much as you can from all of those different places. So, final question for you from me is, what has been your favorite moment so far in your career?
Yeah, I mean, you shared this question with me beforehand, so I had some time to think about this, and I'll share two. One kind of more. One is more product management. One is more product leadership moment. And I think in general, I would say the favorite moments are the hard-earned ones, the ones where you had to go through some pain to get there. So from a product management perspective, I'll share like a quick summary of something that I could talk for hours about. So when I worked at Yammer, the biggest project that I worked on was shipping in the ability to edit posts. Yep. So for those of you who are not familiar with Yammer, you can basically think of it as like Facebook for internal to a company. And of course, so when we built this was in like 2016, 17, maybe. 16 to 17, I think. Facebook had already shipped the ability to edit posts. Of course, Twitter is famously still not allowing that. So, we had we had seen how to perhaps do it, but, there's still plenty of product decisions that need to be taken. It's really a kind of a complex thing, just in terms of all the trade-offs that you can make. I'll just mention a few, like, do you have some kind of history? How do you avoid basically changing the tone or content of a thread starter that somebody has replied to, and now that makes the person who replied look bad. But also more mundane things like I mentioned somebody in my original thread, and now I'm changing who I mentioned. What does that do to the notification that was sent? Lots of these kind of detailed questions. So that was already kind of tricky enough. But to add to that, we had plenty of technical problems in the sense of firstly it was kind of one of the underlying assumptions that the architecture was built with, that a message can never change. So if you're kind of the more technical people will understand what that means. And, just in terms of like caching, how data propagates through the system, there were just, everything was optimized for with a constraint that messages can never change. So we had to kind of completely upend that. We also made the decision of building on a new microservice that was still being built, and that was then abandoned halfway through the project when we had to build around that and took on the microservice that some other team had abandoned, and had to complete at least the parts of it that were required. And also we had already started demoing the feature, kind of at a customer conference, like 3 months into the project, but the project would take another 6 months. So when we actually finally shipped this thing with lots of cut corners and everything, but still it was the customer reaction was super positive, because most people, like all of the edge cases that we had to basically drop under the table, they didn't care about that. Most people were just like, hey, I made an embarrassing typo and I want to correct that, and that was certainly a use case that we had covered. So that was a 9 months of work, but in the end, very happy ending, and very happy about the positive feedback that we got for that. The other anecdote that I wanted to share is one where, that was where I really kind of a moment where I felt myself growing as a manager and as a product leader. So we had well, this was when I was at 8fit. We had a project that was, somewhat challenging. There was an engineer working together directly with a designer, exploring some new direction. It doesn't really matter what the exact problem there was, but it seemed like there was not really alignment. The designer was doing exploring a different direction than the engineer, and they weren't really working together. And it was a big mess. And I was head of product. I wasn't really involved, but it was kind of like the project was there, and I was trying to see if I can get them aligned. It wasn't working, and I didn't really have the capacity to think about it. And it was kind of dragging on for weeks. And eventually I took the decision to give this to one of my product managers. And it wasn't really in his area or whatever, but I approached him and said, look, there's this really messy problem there. I want you to go in and try if you can fix it. And, I knew that he was good at stakeholder management. I knew that he was good at basically getting in different perspectives and aligning them. And at that moment, I felt bad of taking this messy problem where I felt like I should have already solved this, but I just didn't have the time for it. And, just passing it to one of the people that were working for me. But this kind of delegation of just a few weeks later, the whole problem was resolved, and I was talking to the person that I had given this problem to, and he told me, it felt really scary and difficult at the beginning, but I also felt like it felt great to resolve it, and also felt like the trust that was put in me to take this messy thing that's kind of off the rails and putting it back on track was great. And that just felt so good for me as a manager, as a leader, that hey, this actually, it helped in the end. It helped everyone involved. It helped me because I just didn't have the capacity to solve it. It helped him because he grew on it, and he, had really a moment of success. And it helped the company and the team because there was this messy situation, and this was now resolved, and we had some good way forward. So yeah, again, that's just when you move from an individual contributor role to a management role, it's often that you feel like the hairiest, the biggest problems you should still take on and solve because you are the most experienced. But really, those are also the opportunities for people on your team to grow. And that's kind of a tangible situation where I realized that, and where I was really glad to have made that decision in the end.
Yep. Oh, that's great. Those are great. Thank you for sharing. Well, Jens, thank you so much for joining. This has been such a great conversation. I feel like we could dive into each of these topics individually for at least an hour on any specific one. But are there any final thoughts that you have before we kind of wrap things up?
No, not really. This has been a fun conversation, and yeah, I could talk about many of these things for hours, but yeah, it's always fun to kind of step back and reflect on what's happening and things that I've experienced as well over the course of my career.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for sharing some of your experience. I think this has been an absolutely amazing conversation. Where can people go to find out more about you?
You can find me on my website, which is jefago.com, or on Twitter at mrjefago. And yeah, you'll find links to also other places. You can also find me on Medium or on LinkedIn. I publish I triple post my article on Medium, on LinkedIn, and on my own personal website. And of course, I also post on the Twitter.
Awesome. Okay. We'll put the links in the show notes to all of those. So check out the links in the show notes for all of the different places. And again, thank you so much for joining. And before we go, I don't know if you have any, we usually end with a shout out or a gripe for something that you've been using, any products. I don't know if you have any shout outs or gripes on stuff that you have.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. So, I think the one that immediately came to mind is what I'm wearing in my ears right now, my AirPods, which I really have a love-hate relationship with, because I love them in the fact that, they are a really well-designed product. And yeah, I don't think I could kind of live without them anymore. But I also really do not understand how Apple could have made the kind of auto connection functionality is so bad. It like continuously switches to the wrong device. And I don't know how that's possible because, like all the Apple magic, and then you're like, you have the little, when you kind of flip open the case and it's meant to show up on your phone display, like half of the time it doesn't work. And I don't know why. And it just kind of drives me mad that I had to install this widget shortcut to connect the AirPods to my phone. And also that doesn't work always. It's just, I just don't understand how Apple can make such an experience so bad. Like I have my trusty 5+ years old Bose headphones that also connect to multiple devices, but I have never had the issue that, accidentally I play music on my phone and it comes out of the speakers instead of the earphones that I have in my ears. It's just, I just do not understand how that experience is so bad and hasn't been fixed.
Yep. No, totally hear that. I have the same complaint. I don't even rely on my Apple AirPods as much as most people do. But I have the same issue. So, totally agree. All right. I'll give a quick shout out here to Headspace, which I used for a while, and we've started using it again. It's a meditation app. So I'm going to be trying out probably a couple different ones over the next little bit, but this is the one we're starting with. And we're getting our kids into some meditation and mindfulness practices. So they were all in. Like we talked to them a little bit about it, and they're like, yeah, we totally want to start doing that, because they've been going to school for a little bit now and it's got them a little stressed out. And so like, maybe we should start doing like some little bit of meditation and mindfulness and start relaxing. And they're like, yeah, we should totally do that. So we've been using that for a little bit, and they have been enjoying it. So we'll give a shout out.
I'll add a shout out then. Actually, I have maybe two more shout outs. Okay. So, that just kind of made me think of, what we've been trying. We've been using Calm, also meditation app Calm, which has, some Thomas the Tank Engine meditations, and our older one loves Thomas the Tank Engine. So, I feel like he's 3 years old, so he's still a little bit too impatient to actually sit through even like these 5-minute meditations. But, we've been trying, and we've been, sometimes when he gets a tantrum or whatever, we've been trying to use the Thomas the Tank Engine, calm your anger meditation. So we'll see how that goes. I did want to add one other unrelated app shout out, because we are on a podcast here after all. I've tried different podcasts up, but I always keep coming back to Pocket Casts. And I've tried Overcast, I've tried other apps, but Pocket Cast is somehow just the one that fits my mental model for how a podcast app should work. And I think that to me is like the maybe the biggest thing of how does the app react to what I'm doing? Can I do what I'm doing, or is it frustrating? And in addition, I just love the way that you kind of customize the playback. I have my ideal playback speed at 2.3x, which I need that 0.3 extra to just kind of save those precious minutes. So yeah, that's another shout out.
Nice. 2.3. I don't think I've ever met anybody who's been faster than me. I usually am 2 to 2.1. So going at 2.3, I love it. That is awesome. I might have to crank it up to 2.3 now just to see what that's like, but very, very cool. And we'll have to try Calm. I was looking at Calm and I was between those two apps. And so we started using Headspace and just giving that one a try, but we'll probably experiment with Calm as well and see how that one goes. But they both looked good, so I think they both are. I used to have a year-long streak on Headspace at some point, but yeah, that's also has been a while. Yep. Okay, awesome. Well, again, thank you so much. This has been an amazing conversation. So, all right, we will see everybody again next time. Thanks again. Thanks again for listening. If you like the show, be sure to follow or subscribe on your favorite podcast app. You can follow the show on Twitter at prod by design. That's prod_by_design. You can follow me at Kyle Larry Evans on Twitter as well. If you want more product conversation, check out my newsletter, Product Thinking, at productthinking.cc. You can follow me on Medium at Kyle Larry Evans as well, or check out my Medium publication, Product by Design. Thanks again.